Yes, so thank you so much for having us. My name is Monica and I'm joined by David. I work with Microsoft at the Africa Development Center here in Nairobi. I'm a program manager working specifically on a product called Microsoft Graph. So hopefully most of you have used it. In particular, the part that I handle is related to a protocol called OData, so the OData protocol that is used to build web services. So I do hope that maybe some of you have interacted with some of that. The purpose of this conversation, though, is the Power Platform. So I'm going to let David introduce himself before we continue.
Hi, everyone. My name is David, and I work with Monica under the Microsoft Graph organization, and I specifically work on the OData stack. And for that means we are responsible for the OData libraries in .NET, and also getting to also maintain the OData site and other parts of the protocol as well. Back to you, Monica.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Hope you can see that. And I hope you can hear me okay. So we have been, this is the third of a series of webinars that we've been having around the Power Platform. The Power Platform is a low-code or no-code set of tools that make it easy for developers, be they professional or citizen developers, to be able to build applications that are truly business-grade. So in the last two sessions, we have looked at different parts of the Power Platform, and today we're going to revisit the PowerAutomate and maybe go a little bit more deep into that. So we hope that it will be extremely useful for all of us. Just to remind all of us, what we already hopefully know is that the Power Platform has basically 4 pieces of the pie, right? So we looked at PowerApps in the first session, where we looked at how developers or even non-developers can be able to build applications. And these applications are data rich. They can use data from different sources, and they could be available also on different channels. Power BI is all about dashboards. It's probably the most popular or the one that's most known. Looking at how interactive dashboards can be able to provide insights to different organizations. As I mentioned, we looked at PowerAutomate previously, and today David is going to go a lot deeper into that. And then virtual agents are also somewhat automate, and that's why the word automate, you can notice, is common here and here. But what the main thing that Power Virtual Agents automate is really the conversations. So we're also going to talk a little bit about Power Virtual Agents, and we hope that it's going to be a helpful conversation. The whole idea, again, is to make sure that we don't code as much. So less code, more power. So if we can write as little code as possible, then the better. I'm going to let David continue by recapping some of what we did.
Okay. In April, which was the first part of the series, we talked about the different types of components that make up PowerApps, which Monica has also touched on. That's the PowerApps, Automate, BI, and Virtual Agents. And we also talked about the data connectors, the common data service, and the common data schema. And for the data schema, this is actually what we talked about is the way the common data schema model talks about and gives entities that are domain specific for different parts, which is available in the next slide. I think, and so what we have in this is that we have accounts which are going to be specific for any, let me request control, sorry. So what happens in this case is we have domain specific entities that have been defined, and the entities in this case will be, can be shared between not only PowerApps and the Dynamics platform, but also other applications that have the same, that consume the same open standard, because this is an open standard. And in this we have notions like in the healthcare space, a patient, what an episode of care is, what an encounter is, in the marketing space, we have accounts, contacts, events, marketing emails, and this allows you to be able to segue very well to the common data service. And the common data service gives us, next slide. The common data service gives you a way to be able to store and model your business data. And it's also a platform that is also used in Dynamics 365 if you've ever used it. And it allows you to be able to do a lot of really cool things, which we will be doing next. After that, in the next session, we handled what the different types of power. In the same session, we actually talked about how the Power App part is divided into three. We have Canvas apps, model-driven apps, and portals. And we also talked about the AI builder for classification. Today, I'll also touch on model-driven applications and a bit of portals, just to give you a feel of where you can use either of them. And they do have their own advantages and disadvantages. And you know, they're not a one-size-fits-all, but in each case, you'll be able to choose the right application and platform that you need to use. So, that was the April recap, and in the May recap, we talked about PowerAutomate and went a little bit deeper and talked about how what composes a workflow, and that's a trigger, set of actions, conditions, loops, and a trigger could be, in this case, an automated instant or a scheduled flow. An instant in this case would be you could create a flow whereby you click a button and then it's instantiated. An automated one is whereby if an item is created, then the flow is kickstarted, and when it starts, you know, it continues executing the other parts. We also gave a contrast between Azure Logic Apps and PowerAutomate and examples, and we showed a little bit about the simple flows, and we introduced the lease agreement flow, which I'll be going a bit deeper today on. And yes, so let's talk about business process flows. So business process flows are, in this case, flows that act as guides when data is being created, and they also guide in creation of consistent and uniform data. An example is the one that you see on the left-hand side, and in this case we have a wizard of sorts, and in each of the wizard steps we have the stages and the steps. So a stage contains, in this case, could be design, another one could be develop, and then in the develop stage, we could have multiple steps under it. So let's look at some of the advantages of this. And the good thing is about business process flows is that they can span multiple entities, although there's a catch for that, which I'll be showing next. And you can have multiple flows created per entity, and they can also be nested to be able to give you access to different parts of the business. So you could have an HR flow that ties into an onboarding flow and something else of the sort. And the good thing about them is that you can control the stages to be only visible using security groups to the relevant parties. And then I'm trying to move to the next slide. I don't know why. Okay, so I talked about some of the limitations, and I think there's a window that's preventing it from showing. So let me go back. Sorry. So in the business flows, some of the limitations that one encounters is in any flow, there can't be more than 10 activated business flows per entity. So that's one of the limitations of the Power Platform, and one needs to know that. Let me go back to 2 slides up. I think probably, let me try and go back. And the other one is each process can only contain about 30 stages. So at the same time, having more than 30 stages, I think would be something that is too complicated. So for simplicity, I think that's a good number of stages to have. And at the same time, multiple entity flows, that is a business process flow that has multiple entities can only have a maximum of 5 entities. So in this case, I'm going to look at the lease agreement flow. Let me go back. Seems like it's not doing what I wanted to do. Yes, the lease agreement flow. And in this case, the lease agreement flow, I think I've clicked up too fast. What we do have is tenants get an agreement in our organization, and after a tenant gets an agreement, then they get an approval. They get to approve that the agreement looks okay, and then they share the agreement. So in this case, in our organization, this is being done via email. So we are having 2 flows that occur at the same time in the real world. So one mirrors the other. So, and in this case, once the agreement has been shared and the tenant has agreed to it and sent it back, then it goes back to the lawyer for an approval, and then the agency/owner also gets the ability to see to accept the agreement, and then after that the final copy is then shared on the organization's server, and if any house is let go, then you can advertise this via Twitter. So the good thing about this is that we can be able to chunk this down to entities and the data from the data that's being collected, and then design how the business process flow is going to look like. So one of the key considerations that you want to do at this point is you want to be able to design this as you would probably design a database if you've ever done that exercise before. But don't be scared. At the same time, it's also pretty logical as to what data the organization will be collecting. So in the next slide, what I do have is the different data that the organization wants to collect, and then we're going to add extra information to it. So,
David, let me recommend you share the screen so that you can navigate properly through the slides.
Okay, let me do that. Let me share my screen. Okay, share screen too. Let me know when you can see it. So I'll be looking to this side from time to time because I have the browser on this side so that I can be able to perform the demo. So in this case, the data that's collected is they want to collect the tenant information, which is the name, phone number, email, and documents. And this is just gotten from the form that they do give out to the during the lease step. And in this case, the form would contain personal information for the tenant, which is the name, phone number, email, and a copy of the ID. And then there's a part which is filled by the organization, which contains the house information. So that's the location of the house, the description, the amount of floor space, is it a 2-bedroom, who the house manager is, and also there's extra documents that might be collected in this case, which is the ID, a copy of the ID, or another identifying document, a contract, and probably a lease and other documents. So if we blow this out and we want to design the entities, this is how we would probably go about it. And in this case, we'd have tenant information. This would contain the name, phone number, and the email address. For the house information, we have the location, the identifier of the house. So is it, let's say, if in this case, that would be the name, let's say B11, A11, Dovo 1, that identifies the specific house that the person wants to go to. A description, which can be free text, just to list probably actual things that the house has and also other things. The floor space, the house manager, and the current tenant. The current tenant in this case is going to be a relation to the tenant information. And then the documents that are being collected in this case, we would have a document type. So is it an ID, contract, and list? And this just borrows from the previous slide, the information we had in the previous slide. We also have the document name because specific documents will have a title, and this would be the title. And then the attachment, which is the attachment to the document, and then relations to the tenant and a person who approves it, because documents also need to be approved to say this is actually a legit document because of KYC steps where know your customer. And then we have the process, and then at this we can track the process by the status and who's processing it by, and other information that could be there. So this is not exhaustive and just gives you an idea. Is supposed to tease out the idea of what you could have in this case. And so let's look at how we can simplify this business flow. And see how can we make it a bit easier for us to be able to model it and have it in this short period of time, and see how we can actually make this. So the simplified business flow, when we are automating this, is that the organization is willing to send a lease agreement via email to the prospective tenant. And after the tenant approves and shares a copy via email, then the agent logs the contract and uploads it to the group's OneDrive and kickstarts the approval process. And then KYC approvals happen for the user, and then lawyer approves the agreement on the application. On the business process flow, in this case, we will not be doing physical signatures. We want to do this via digital signatures once we have the document in our possession for in this case. And after this, we're going to have the agency and owner also approving to the agreement, and now we have the three parties agreeing to the same thing. And at this point, you're making it it's easier for them to manage and have consistent data, and also, contribute to happiness index. So in this case, I'm just going to make it into a flat entity for simplicity. This is not a limitation of PowerApps. I'm just making this to make it easier to be able to show how you can have a business process flow occur on one entity. There's no limit to how you can do this. And in the demo, I'll be showing and also talking about how which steps you can be able to add a new entity and the considerations that you want to do. And it's demo time. So I'll stop sharing the screen for minutes so that I can switch to the browser. I'll share screen to stop the presentation. And oops, that's the documentation that I was going through in the morning. You're not meant to see that. That's I know these things by head. Okay, so let's start with how to create an entity. So when you start out, you'll start from the home area. And what you want to be able to do is create first the CDS entity. And from the CDS entity, the one that you're going to do is the entity that we showed right here. So that's the the tenancy legal documents entity, which will have this. For sake of time, I've created part of them, but I'll show you how to create a new one, and then we'll fill out the extra parts for the entity that exists. So what you'll do in this case, you'll go to data, click on entities, and that'll take a short amount of time. Click new entity, and in this case, we'll just call it tenant legal documents docs for brevity. And what you're going to have, the primary field in this case, we're just going to call it document name, document title, document. So this is the primary key that is going to be unique in this case. Let me zoom in because sometimes some of the things might not be clear. I think 150% is not bad. So we want to, once we are done with this, you can see there's an enabled attachments. I'll not be enabling this, but in some entities, you might want to do this when you're using model-driven applications. It allows you to be able to have attachments also happen as notes. So you could have extra documents that are also generated as part of the flow. An example would, in this case, would be in the KYC step, you might want to have a certificate of good conduct, maybe generated, or a background information check, and have that added to this. But in this case, our organization is very simple, and we trust people to be good neighbors. Nyumba Kumi. And click done. And then after this, we can add extra fields. So in this case, I'll just add the type. So I'll just do KYC type and phone number and email, and then switch to the other entity. So as this is being created, you'll notice that there are extra fields that will be created at the after the provisioning is done. As you can see, provisioning the entities in the background, but you can continue making changes. So voila, we have extra things added. And don't be scared at this point in time. It's normal to have those. So in this case, we will do email. So this will be customer email. Customer email. It's going to be of type email. It is required. Searchable, and we're just going to click done. You can add multiple entities, multiple fields. In this case, the next one we're going to do is customer phone number, and we have the phone number, and click done, and then you can click save entity. And while that's being saved, I'll just switch to the existing entity that I'd already created. In this case, that's the, oops, that's not the right one. Tenancy legal documents, and we'll just check KYC approval. Then the thing that I'm lacking in this case is the lawyer approve reject. So in this case, I'll just create a field for lawyer. I think approver. In this case, is going to be an email field because emails in our context are going to be unique. And click done. Then I'm going to add lawyer. In this case, I'll change this to a select. You can have option select or two option select. Two option in this case would be yes or no, and option select allows you to be able to create a custom groups. In this case, I'll just use this. A yes or no would have sufficed, but in this case, I want to create an option set. I'll click new option set, and in this case, I could just say Yes. Or maybe we could have something else in this case, but for now we'll just have, we'll call this pending. So just create that, done, save entity, and we have our entity. So that's the first step. The next part that we want to do is I'm just going to show you what the form looks like. And every entity, CDS entity that's created, it has a form. And in this case, we have, we're going to look at the main form. I'll click that very fast. I'd already pre-populated the form before this to save on time. In this case, we will see the form load. It's going to take some time. And this is a form that will be used to create an entity in this case. So I'll just click switch to classic. And the reason for this is I just want to show you how it looks in both worlds. And in the next set of steps, we will be switching to classic to enable some of the fields. So in classic, in this case, what we want to do is just add a document. Okay, I think I've added all of them. Wow. Okay, so I will just add an ID URL content, so when we scan the document, we want to be able to add it to this case. So I'll just save. And after saving in the classic mode, you need to publish. And to publish the customization, and our form is ready. So I'll just close that pretty fast and go back. Since we're done with the form and we're happy about it and how it looks, I'll now swap to go back. Sorry, I'll just want to go back. Okay. I'll just go back. And I think my browser has frozen. Oops. Just a minute. Wrong place. I'll just go back to this. So I had this ready, open, because, well, demo gods sometimes can be tricksters. So in this case, I'll now that we have our entity done, now I want to start creating the business process flow. But there's a step that's always required in this case. So we need to be able to expose the specific entity to be visible to the business flow processor. So in this case, I'll head to solutions. In any CDS project that's created has a default solution, so I'll just open that. And in this, we will have our entities here. So, but I'll just switch to classic. This is a step that I mentioned that we'll have to switch to classic to. And when we move to classic, we want to edit the entity. And enable business process flows. So I'm going to wait for that. It's taking some time. Oh, sorry, pop-up blocked. So I should allow. Let's click again. So in the next view that we're going to see, it's going to be similar to what we saw earlier. We're going to expand the entities and then go to our entity. In the basic tab, we're going to select the business process flow and activate it, then save and publish like we did before. So we have our pop-up open, and I'm just going to perform those steps very fast. So entities, I'll expand that, scroll, and what I'm looking for is I've forgotten what you call it. Oh, it's going to be what is the name? Let me look at the slide one more time. Check. Yes, starts with a T. So OPQRST. So tenancy legal documents. that we can see where that is. So in the process, in the general tab, we can see this part, but you're not really interested in that. So we're just going to come and see and tick this. And once we click this, we click save and publish. So I'll perform this for the TLD docs so that you see how that looks like, but it pretty much is just the same thing. So it's whenever you create a new entity, it's not enabled. So you just select that, save. So it tells you updating entity. And once it's done, we click publish. Publish. Okay, yes, it's loading. Publishing customizations. And that's going to take a few seconds. Well, I mean, once it's done, we should be able to now go to the other part of the workflow and then start creating a business process flow. I'm not going to wait for this because this is not the entity we are working on. So the entity that we are working on is already published. So I'll just swap directly to my flows here. And the first thing I want to do is create a business process flow. So my flows, business process flow. And I'll create a very simple one. In this case, I'll just click new. The flow name, I'll give it TD docs. Automatically it creates one for me, and then I'll just do 10 and see label documents, select, create, and like magic, we have our first business process flow. So I'm not going to work on this one. I'm just going to just show you how the UI looks like and introduce you to the concepts. Then I'll move to the one that I had already created before for the sake of time. So what you do have here, this is what we call the stage, and the stage has steps, like I mentioned earlier, and the steps can be made up of any of these parts. So we can have a data step. Data steps are for data entry. We can have a workflow step. This invokes a different workflow. We can have an action step and a flow step, which is the interesting part. So in this case, I'll just click on the data step, and whenever you create a new business process flow, the first part where you select the entity, that entity is the one that you can use in the first stage. And in this case, what we will do is the new step name is just we want to enter the name. That's simple. And apply. I like to hit save whenever I'm working on something, just because you might lose power. You could just go back to here and drag and drop. Or you could be like me and just click add data step, and it brings you this thing is the pluses, and then from here you can select something different, and then apply, save. Once you're done with completing any of this, you just click activate to have it activated, and it brings you this nice progress bar to show you things are actually happening behind the, in the background. And since this is not the one that I wanted to show, I'm just going to close it and not really care much about it. Well, I do care about it, but let me go to the one that I wanted to show. So I'll edit this. This one I had prepared earlier. So what we do have is we have tenancy legal documents that are being, that's the entity, and the first step in our business process flow is KYC. The other one is lease agreement. And in this case, we have in the KYC, the person verifies that the tenant name is the same that's in the, that you find in the, what do you call it? The ID, the phone number is works, ID mteja, ID URL that contains the URL to the scanned document, And the next step is just uploading the list number and the URL. And in this case, we can now add a different type of flow here. And for that, we need now to create a flow that is specific to this work solution. And I'll be switching between solution-specific flows and flows. For the solution-specific ones, these are the ones that you can only, they are the ones that you can only access, in this case, that are tied to the solution, and they can be accessed. They're the only ones that can be accessed inside a business process flow. So in this case, I'll just go back to manage my flows. I'll go to solution again, wait for that to load. And once I'm done with this, I will click default solution, because that's what you're working on in this case. And it brings you this nice new tab. And with this now, I can create any of these entities in the solution. And in this case, I just wanted to create a flow. And in this case, the flow will be taking whenever a new entity is created and we get to a certain step, in that step, it's going to be activated. And when it's activated, we are going to now send approval emails to the lawyer. And then what we wish to do in this one is automatically fill in parts of that business process flow step. So the way you would go about it is you'd come here. It's the common data service selector, and what we want to do is just search selected. To tell you when a record is selected, common data service, I'll select that. What you want to do is, in this case, it will ask what the environment is. The environment is going to be the default one, because you might have multiple environments in the you need to select the entity that you're working on, and in this case, it's going to be, well, I could just search it. So tenancy, legal documents, and we want to add an extra item here. We could add any of those inputs. So in this case, I just want file content. So in this case, the person approving it needs to upload a document. In this case, now the lawyer will read the existing lease agreement and now sign and then upload their signed copy. And in this case, we have that. So this is where we are going to have it. We're going to call this just call it lawyer copy, L copy, for brevity. And once you're done, we want to add a new step. So in this case, we want to be able to just pass the workflow step and get it as JSON. And what we need to do in this step is just search JSON, pass JSON, choose that. The content in this case, it brings you this nice dynamic content thing that I showed in the previous one. In this case, we're going to select the content is the entity, and the schema in this case, well, did I forget how to add the schema? Oh no, it's because I have it handily here. But if you want to get the schema, this is documented in the PowerApps documentation. You can find this schema there to reuse. It's yours to reuse. In this case, I'll just paste that here, and I'm going to create a new step. So now that we have the record is selected, we've passed the business process flow. Now we have the data from both of them. Now we can proceed to the next step, which is approval. And if you tuned into the last webinar, what we're going to do is start and wait for an approval. This is the same thing that we did in that one. So in this case, we're going to select an approval type. We just want the first one to respond. In this case, if we have multiple lawyers, we just want the first one who responds, that's what we're going to take. And then we're going to ignore the others. In this case, we're going to call this, so we want to use this as a stage name. So BI flow stage name or local name and the record ID. And then in this case, we want to assign this to me. So it's going to be Dawa. This should suggest me. And the lawyer is also a software engineer, part-time. So in this case, we're going to have the details. In this case, we're going to tell him, please approve. So this now could go to a different set of approvals. In this case, please approve. And we're going to have the link ID was identifier business stage record ID. And the item in this case is going to be we called it, what is the file name? I think we called it file. Expand this. No, it's in here. No, wait. L copy. That's what you want to. This is an item that needs to be approved. So this is L copy. Oh, oops. I need to add it here. So we have that. And we can have extra steps. We can continue building this out to multiple levels. We could add a new condition, and after the condition, if yes, I tackled this before. We could, in this case, just perform a data step, or we want to be able to do extra things. These are all the things that, in this case, we might want to create a new record. In this case, we want to create a record that saves this somewhere else, but in this case, and I talked about this earlier, and it's pretty much the same thing that you would do with the SharePoint connector. So I won't delve into that because of time. So I will just save this. And since I had something prepared already ahead of time, this is what I had prepared. So this has already been saved. I'll go back and just show you the details part. The status currently shows off, and I ran into a small issue. So I can't turn this on because of GDPR in my organization. And I'll share a link to how you can solve that issue. And once you're done, I'll just run the flow that I created earlier. So this is it. I'll just click apply, update, and run. Okay, so okay. Apply, run. Okay, let me go back. I think I've gone into Monica's time. So guys, I'll just probably show a very quick one and then just stop. And then if you have extra time, we'll just have this later. But this is a whole piece by itself. So in this case, we have the first step ready, then you have the KYC steps. And in this case, this is where the person would add information. And then we move on to the next part, and voila, those are the 3 steps in our business process flow. Monica, back to you. Sorry for eating to a lot of your time.
No worries, no worries. I think it was very, very helpful. So I'm quickly going to take us through the Power Virtual Agents. I'm going to take control of the screen for 1 second. Okay, so I hope you can all see the screen on my presentation. So I'll be very, very quick, hopefully. Basically, David has gone into an in-depth. I wish we had more time to really finish that in depth and see really the power of PowerAutomate, right? But I think I want to introduce this idea of Power Virtual Agent briefly, because Power Virtual Agents are pretty much the new kid. It's like the new kid on the block, and it can allow us to really embed PowerAutomate workflows within a user experience, such as a chat conversation with a bot, and users might not even know that there's a flow that was triggered, right? That's the whole idea. So they are better together if you use them together. But maybe just to give us a little bit of background, but I hope all of us maybe have interacted with virtual agents before. The experience might be positive or negative depending on how you have gone through it. Some of us, if you reach out to customer care or some other channel and you realize you're talking to a bot, you may not be very happy. Maybe some of us go directly to try and talk to a human. But really, you cannot be able to underestimate the power of virtual agents. And the importance of virtual agents is really to kind of like ease the burden on human agents, right? Because we really know it's really not possible to have enough people to answer all level of questions all the time, in all time zones, you can imagine. So it's really helpful to kind of have this kind of conversational agents that really interact with people. So in the real world, you have applications of chatbots in marketing, in customer service, and also because you have a lot of, it's a question and answer kind of scenario, you can really use them for data collection as well. In the context of Power Virtual Agents, we're going to talk about three things. One is topics, entities, and then actions. We have kind of looked at entities a lot in the PowerAutomate section, so I won't go very deep into that, but I'll really try and focus on topics because that's like an important foundational block of Power Virtual Agents. And so what is a topic? Basically, a topic is, as the name suggests, it's a topic, but it is one that is triggered by a couple of phrases. So word phrases that users would typically type, users would typically type or enter, and this would trigger a conversation. And so topics are really the foundational element of really defining how that bot will behave. And we'll look at an example in a few seconds, in a few minutes. And there are two types of topics. You have user topics and you have system topics. So as the name suggests, system topics are built in and user topics are the ones that you create as a user. Now, if you are beginning and you are in an organization that already has, a website, you probably have an FAQ page. One of the things that you could do is that you could use that FAQ page to kind of give you a head start in terms of the potential topics that you could have. Because the idea of an FAQ page is like it's a page that people interact with and they're able to get the answers that they need. So if you were to convert that FAQ page into quote unquote a bot, then you'd be very many steps ahead and people would be able to type in and chat with the bot and get the answers they need. So maybe just to show us a very quick example, go ahead and share. Share my entire screen so that I can switch between different pages. I hope you can see what I'm looking at right now. So maybe to start us off, if you're completely beginning, the place you go to in order to start, to have your very fast virtual agent is this website, powerva.microsoft.com. So I'd encourage all of you to really go there and try out to create your own bot. Sign up and try create a few topics and play around with them. This particular interface is not too difficult to understand. You have a navigation bar here. This particular column shows you a way, or it's just an interface to allow you to test the bot. And then this is pretty much your work canvas where you can be able to experiment with and edit different topics and different elements. At the top here, you have a panel where you can be able to switch between one bot and another because you might have many bots. And obviously you have the rest of the icons that show you the flags, the notification settings, etc. So this is an example of like a very, very simple topic, right? And I guess I wanted to show you the idea of a topic. A topic always has, and you can find them under this. Maybe I should go back. They're always you can find them under this particular column. As I mentioned, you have user and system topics. These are the examples that I have created for myself. And just to show you an example, this is the locations. If I want to create a simple topic that just says, where are your offices? These are examples of like trigger phrases. I've just entered a few trigger phrases and I can go to my authoring canvas and be able to edit a lot more. And And basically on this end, you'll be able to see how a user is interacted with it. Like for example, an hour ago, I typed where your office is, and it was able to trigger the first message, which is, I'm happy to tell you more about your branches. And pretty much the message that I see here is what I get. So that is this is a very, very simple kind of a topic. It just has like 2 messages and that's it. It triggers 2 messages and you're done. To show you another example, maybe an example of what I meant by bootstrapping. So if you, as I mentioned, if you have an FAQ site, you simply come to the suggest topics button here, and you're able to type in a link. Let me see. Oh, no, that's not a link. But you can type in a link like the FAQ page of your company or something else, and immediately you click on start, it will be able to create so many recommendations. These are examples that I created a while back. And you can be able to get into one of them and edit. You probably don't want your customers to have to type in this whole message as a trigger phrase. So you probably want to get in and edit this particular phrase and allow people to kind of like interact with this topic. So this is just a way of giving you a head start in terms of your topics. Let me go back to the demo and into the slides and talk a little bit about entities. So there are 2 types of entities. And as I think we've looked at, the word entity is used a lot when you're talking about the Power Platform, and it shouldn't cause any confusion. In this particular case, we just mean the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. An entity in this case would be something like age, city. You know, an example here that I've highlighted of a built-in entity is a country. And so you might want different user experiences for someone. Let's say after you ask them, so where do you come from? And they enter, oh, I'm from the United Kingdom. You can define your own entities. This is a simple example where you're just defining a county. So I'll show you an example where I've just defined a county and entered a few examples such as Nairobi, Kisumu, or Mombasa. Let me show you that really quickly. So this is an example. So you find them under entities on the powerva.microsoft.com. You can enter as many as you want, many other options. So this is like a list, and it is a closed list. So you have to enter something that is on this particular list. To show us an example of where we have used that particular entity, I've used it here. This is another conversation, maybe just to show you how it works. I'll try and interact with it. How do I buy tiles? So in another life, I'd probably own a shop for doing tiles. So pretty much you can see I'm just having a conversation with it. Which county would you like it to be delivered? Let's say I say Kisumu. If I say Kisumu, obviously it will go on this particular route, because here you can see I have a condition that if the county is Nairobi, then go down this path. For all other conditions, go this other side. So you'll see I say, I get a message, there's an additional transport charge for 500 Kenya shillings per kilometer. Is that acceptable? Yes. And that should go down and pretty much go to the last question here. So what type of tile are you interested in? I say wooden. I'm able to go down and I'm able to, you can see the different nodes as they fire. And it ends. So basically what you can see here, you can see I made use of a custom entity that I had defined earlier. You can also make use of pre-built entities. I have been able to do conditions almost in a similar way as you do on PowerAutomate. So it's a very similar kind of UI and user experience. When I finish, I can choose for my users to be able to get a survey. So did that answer your question? This is not part of this particular topic, but I'll say yes or no. And then I'll be able to give a rating. So I'll show you where this particular feedback goes to, because it's important for you as the person who has built the bot to be able to tell where, how are people interacting with your bot? Are there areas in which you need to improve? Almost finally, let's talk about actions. So actions are important because, as I have mentioned, we are talking about PowerAutomate. And so, you could be able to embed a flow within a chat conversation. And it's extremely easy. You simply just click on call an action, and then you can see it automatically allows you to be able to create a flow. Or if you have some that are pre-existing, you can be able to see them there. So that's just an example. Oh, sorry. And then maybe to mention something that is really important is that how Microsoft has built our bots. It's really important for us. We have tried our best to make them as human as possible. So if a user has already answered a question, let's say they have said, my name is Monica, down the road, we don't want the bot to ask the user again, what is your name? So the bot is able to kind of fill the slots. That's what we call slot filling, where if a user had already answered a question, then they don't really need to answer it again down the road. We also have fuzzy mapping, or what you can just call not a really one-to-one mapping between the triggers and what the customer is able to type. So if somebody enters customer service, for example, and what you had as a trigger phrase is something not exactly that, but it is something to do with customer care, customer service, then the bot is able to understand that the user actually means the same thing, and that particular topic is able to trigger. I'll hold on to that demo. I'll show you in a few minutes. In order for you to publish, there are very many options. These are some of the options that you can be able to, where you can be able to publish on custom websites, on Facebook, on Slack, etc. So it's a very, very easy process. And finally, you'll be able to see analytics that show you how your bot is performing. So for example, you can see engagement, how many times has your bot actually successfully fired a topic, and how many of those times did it solve a customer's problem? How many times did somebody say they still wanted to talk to a human? And how many times was it abandoned completely? So it's important for you as a person building the bot to be able to analyze what are the drivers of escalation and abandonment. So, and I think we are done, and I see we are pretty much done with the time. So I'll stop there. I'll stop sharing, and then hand it over to Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Monica. Actually, because we're running out of time, I'll switch over to Amos. And I'll just say that thanks so much, David and Monica, for the amazing presentation. And for our attendees, the slides and the recordings are going to be available. There's been a link that has been sent for a survey. If you give us your information there, we'll be able to share with you the slide decks as well as the recording of this presentation. Over to you, Amos.
Great summary, and thanks again, Monica and David. Seems today the demo gods were really on our side. Oh, I'm forgetting Monica. It seems the demo gods were really on our side. We didn't have any major hiccups as we were going through the demo. For making the time for planning and even preparing the entire presentation, we really appreciate. I know we probably needed more time. And if you're attending and you feel that we probably need to dig deeper or have more on the demo, please share that information on the feedback form, and we'll definitely be planning on how we are going to get back on this. So unless Monica, any last words? David, any last words? We should mention Monica, where the Monica is coming from.
Yes, please clarify so that people don't wonder why the delay.
It's not Monica without a H, it's Monica with a H.
Yes, the H is for emphasis.
In conclusion, eh?
Yes. Yeah, but maybe my closing words would be wishing everyone a really great time. Please play around with the Power Platform, especially during this time. So, yes.
Great. David?
I'll just add on to what Monica has said. Please don't be afraid to tinker around, and if you get stuck, you can always reach out in the WhatsApp group, and people will step up to help you. Yeah.
That's true. Perfect. And thanks to everyone who's joined us for this webinar. Definitely, as Gilbert mentioned, we are going to publish this, and we're also going to have the slides also shared to everybody who either registered on the link or you leave us your contact information or on the feedback form. Yeah, thank you and have a good day. Stay safe. And I guess, Gilbert, unless you have any last words, we should be able to now to conclude.
Not for now. Thanks. And
great.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks to everyone. Good day. Enjoy the weekend ahead.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.